And we're live. Welcome to the Eat Well Move Well radio show. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. My guest today, I've been excited for a while. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to call you Matt or Matthew, but Matthew Hayes, all the way from the USA. Thanks for joining us, man. It's great to see you.
No, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. When you reached out, I've had a few podcasts reach out, but I saw yours and I was like, okay, I know this is a guy I'm going to connect with. So.
Oh man, I appreciate it. And you were just saying just before we hit record, and we got to record that gold. I almost got the title for the podcast then was Life After Service. You were speaking about life after service and people reaching out to you, veterans and so on. And that brought me straight into, we got to hit record and say, well, we've lived a life of service, life after service in the military perhaps, but we're still serving, aren't we?
Absolutely. Well, the thing is when you get out, it's funny, I mentioned it because I've been thinking about it, because recently I've had quite a few veterans reach out talking about kind of losing that spark. Like you say, when you're in the military, you've got a very clear mission objective. You know what to expect more or less. And when you get out of that, not only do you miss that, but you're not in that sort of group that you came up with. Like in the Marine Corps, the guys I trained with from the beginning were the guys I went on both my deployments with. So I spent a lot of time with all these people. So we get out and we kind of lose, I don't know, that sense of like what it was to be in the service, but they see us doing what we're doing, kind of evolving, pushing forward, especially on the mental and physical side. And it feels good to sort of help reignite that in other veterans,
It does. It's helping others, man. And that's why I said a life of service. And Ollie Ollerton, his show drops soon, a British SBS guy, was saying the other day, one of the best ways to help yourself is when you're in that dark hole is to help others. And it's true. It's true. It seems to offload those worries of yourself, and you start to help someone out of the hole, and you start to comprehend it a bit better. But Matthew, you're the Heathen Machine. You stood out straight away from me on Instagram. Sean Richardson from Banff Hammer, of course. There's a connection there, and you're a legend with the big Thor hammer of yours. I guess maybe push on to the life after service and you become the Heathen Machine. I mean, what a transition there.
Well, I've worked out most of my life. I mean, I probably started working out when I was about 17, and I'm 40 now. So the whole Heathen Machine thing, I got out, I for years, I got out in about 2013 is when I got out, and did some homesteading. I was married at the time, and a few years back, divorced, blah, all that stuff, went through all that, and decided I was going to live on the road. So I sold my house and got an RV, and I lived on the road for a year and a half full time. I traveled with my gym. I had a trailer, and everywhere I went, I had my gym with me. So I was calling, I just was like, what would be I wanted to use my Instagram to show this journey.
Yeah.
So I'm like, man, I need a cool handle. So I'm like, how about the Drifter Machine? It's like kind of, my RV, and I'm working out and stuff like that. So when I bought this place, I was like, well, I'm not really traveling anymore. So I'm like, I do a lot of research into my Scandinavian roots, and I'm like, well, the Heathen Machine, like that makes sense. I'm like, I'm out here working out like a maniac anyway. And, I'll just go with that, and it's kind of, it's funny. It's just transitioned into this, and it's been really interesting because the growth that's happened on my Instagram, it's only been in the last 4 months. I mean, it's crazy. It's and I've been on Instagram for like 2 years, you know, so it's just interesting how it's all worked out.
Look, for people that are just starting to get to know you, you know, literally look at the Heathen Machine on Insta, and you're great at what you do because you're so genuine, and you put out. I mean, it really grabbed me when you started actually speaking to the camera. But to introduce you to the audience, you know, your professional title we've got here, an ESSA tactical conditioning specialist and writer. I mean, that's phenomenal. That wasn't around when I was in the gym in those years. There was personal trainers and exercise physiologists, but a tactical conditioning specialist, and you show that. And you know, you've got your own show, the HeathenMachine Chronicles, and you're writing as well. That's a whole bunch of different things you're doing.
Well, I found, so going back to life after the military, you kind of flounder a little bit. And I started finding a sense of purpose when I got my homestead. I was gardening, growing my own vegetables, stuff like that. And one thing I talk about, you know, I talk about psychedelics a lot. And I had a really profound experience, and it kind of shifted my thought process. And I decided that in order for me to really feel complete, I needed to tap into my creative side. And so I started writing. And not only did I start writing, I went back to school for English and creative writing, got my degree. And it just, I found that spark, and it was writing. And everything I do right now, the basis of it is writing. With my Instagram, I'm writing these posts, I'm thinking them out. Like, I tell people that my Instagram, it's kind of like a live journal, because everything I write on there is stuff that I tell myself. And I'm like, well, I bet you there's people out there that feel the same way. You know, they might feel like they're alone, you know. And I think it's important when somebody who presents themselves as confident and strong, and they're getting it all the time, they can also be, you know, vulnerable for a bunch of strangers. And it leads to all these really cool conversations where people are like, wow, man, seeing you say that has meant a lot. And yeah, it's so the whole creative piece has been not only healthy and cathartic for me, but it's helping other people. So right now I'm like, yeah, it's so worth it. It's really helped, you know. And then with the podcast, I guess I'd always kicked around the idea of doing a podcast. I was going to do one living on the road, because I'm like, man, this is why not? I'm on the road. This would be great material. Never happened, because I'm sure you know it. There's just a lot to do when you're doing a podcast. But when my account started growing and growing, I posed the question. I was like, hey, would you guys listen to a podcast? And then it was overwhelmingly positive response. So I went about my podcast, and so I write out my transcripts. You know, it's all kind of coming together. All these little seeds I've planted, and it all has to do with writing, and it all has to do with like being mentally and physically, you know, healthy, you know, connecting my creative side with the physical, like the Heathen Machine side. So,
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I've written a few notes down. I write like crazy when I'm interviewing. I'm trying to think ahead, but you've really nailed it simply there. You said a sense of purpose. You know, going back to that gardening and so on, that gave you a sense of purpose. And I often say a man without purpose is lost. And a lot of the guests I've had on the show, they say you got to find your purpose, find your joy. But I love what you did about realizing, literally bringing to reality your creative side, Matt. You know, look at DJ Shipley and the Tribe Skates GBRS guys. You know, hardened shooters, right? Steel Team 6.
mm-hmm.
And their sanding skateboards, that's their creative side coming through, their art therapy. Everyone's got words for it. Brandon Webb, the Navy SEAL sniper program director, and then moved on to to own software media, writing, and so many of these other guys that start writing novels and autobiographies and so on. It really is part of that flow state that we love, we're really good at, but we're accessing it in a different way with creativity.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I have a friend, a good friend of mine, who we served in the Marine Corps. We met in the Marine Corps, and we stay in touch to this day. And he stayed in longer than I did. He stayed until he became a staff sergeant. And as he was getting ready to get out, you know, he was facing, I think what a lot of veterans face, like when their last year is facing them, they're like, oh crap, I gotta actually think about what I'm gonna do after this. So at the time, you know, I was in school, I'm writing, and I kept telling him, you know, how it made me feel, like how I felt, you know, just being in school, writing. So he got out of the military, and he's actually now in school pursuing an English literature degree. He writes, and he's having a lot of these same really cool positive experiences because, you know, I was just this constant mouthpiece in his ear, this voice saying, look, you know, there's things you can do when you get out that will engage your mind and keep you from thinking about, oh, like what you don't have anymore. You don't have the structure anymore. You don't have the people you're with anymore. So I always encourage not only veterans, but really anybody who's struggling with things to like tap into that creative side, write something, journal something, because you never know where that'll lead to. Like with me, I mean, I never knew where it would lead to. And it's like, now I'm playing guitar, I'm making music, and it just led to all these really cool things. And it makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time. I'm learning, you know, I'm staying healthy. And it's not always great, but I mean, I'm in a much better spot when I'm doing these things. So,
of course. You mentioned psychedelics there. Could you speak more to that? Because I mean, a lot of guys have talked about ayahuasca. I don't know at all where you're at with psychedelics. I did get a little look at a live you did the other day, but can you speak to us about how that helped you?
So I got out, like I said, I got out of the Marine Corps about November of 2013. At the time, my ex-wife, she was a hippie, you know, Grateful Dead, that kind of stuff. So when we finally moved to our homestead here this would have been in the western part of Missouri, she had been with me through the dark times. My last year in the Marine Corps was really dark, lots of suicides. I went to rehab, and it was just a really, because it was right after Afghanistan, really rough time. So she wanted to immerse herself in her hippie culture. And I was like, okay, whatever, you know. So we go to a music festival, and you have to understand, you'll understand this, I'm not even a year out of the Marine Corps. I was an infantry, I was a machine gunner, you know, I'm aggressive. And I go to this music festival, I'm around all these hippies, and ended up eating some psilocybin mushrooms, and it changed my life. I was around 3,000 people, and I've never been around 3,000 people that were all happy. And I was like, there's something to this. I need to see what is happening here. So I started researching the science behind psychedelics, and come to find out, psilocybin mushrooms are an amazing depression, PTSD, fear fighter. So I started diving into the world of psychedelics because it changed how I felt about just about everything. I went from kind of feeling hostile and lost to suddenly feeling gratitude and feeling grateful, and then wanting to tap in, because for so long I told myself I wasn't a creative person. I didn't have the talent to do this. So having that one experience fundamentally altered how I felt about all of that stuff.
Wow.
And yeah, it changed everything. Because if I wouldn't have had that experience, I mean, because of that experience, I started writing. I started having more confidence in my creative side. And it really started that journey. And so once I dived into the science, I was like, well, I'm caught. And so there are some veteran groups that there's a group called Veterans for Entheogenic Therapy. They're big supporters, of psychedelics, especially in the veteran community. And it was funny, my VA counselor was also, a supporter of psychedelics. And yeah, I found tremendous amount of healing. It was never a party thing for me. It was a very intense personal experience. Like when I would follow up with it, I'd never use it as like a party fit, nothing like that, because that's not what they're for. So it really, that experience really set me on this really positive, healthy course. And it lasted. It didn't go away. Like, that's the amazing thing about it, is so many veterans they get hooked on these pharmaceuticals, and they're not light pharmaceuticals. A lot of our fellow veterans who are on pharmaceuticals is heavy stuff like trazodone and just that real heavy that can be hard to kick. And I would love to see something in a supportive environment led by professionals, more psychedelic therapy for combat vets and veterans, I think, and then broaden it out to the wider world. I think it'd make for a much healthier society, to be honest.
And from personal experience that you're saying there, that's brilliant. I love that you said you compared it to a conventional treatment, and you didn't state it specifically, but you could be talking antidepressants and sleeping pills and a whole bunch of things. I interviewed Commander Joe Jaturi. He's known as Dr. Deep Sea. I think he's probably the most qualified deep sea scientist attached to the DARPA and SEALs. His show comes out soon. But again, I get to know a guest during the show, and then we moved on to TBIs. I had no idea he was an expert in TBIs, but he got one. And like yourself, you studied, you were motivated, right? Well, he was motivated. He was in a bad way. It was a car accident from memory. And long story short, A, he healed himself. B, he went, well, this protocol is great. I'm going to try it on all these people. But what was good about it, Matt, was there's like 6 or 7 different modalities they use, and none of them has a side effect. So why not try them all? His research paper gets studied soon, but that conventional treatment does hurt us. The antidepressants, the sleeping pills, they got side effects. So it's great to hear you speak about the psychedelics side of them in relation to that.
Well, the rehabilitation program that I went through was specifically for combat vets. It was in San Antonio, Texas, and it was all traditional methods, and it helped and it worked. But the problem with that is you're in a controlled environment, so it's really easy to implement these things that they're doing. Because the reality is, most of the people get out a program like that and they kind of go back to their habits.
Of course, you have to. It's normal.
And then, right, and then they get prescribed medications because they prescribe them at the rehab place. So you're walking out of there probably being on an extra 2 or 3 more prescriptions than when you got there. So the fascinating thing for me with psychedelics and antidepressants is that psilocybin mushrooms trigger the same serotonin receptors as most antidepressants. The problem is most antidepressants take up to 2, maybe 3 weeks to work, where psychedelics, especially psilocybin or something like that, instantly works. Instantly, there's no wait time. It gets to the root of the matter, and it allows you it allows you, it's hard to explain. The best way I can explain it is it allows you to like separate yourself from your emotional thoughts, and you can look at them from a very distant place and be like, wait, that bothered me? Like I can get over that. And then when you come out of that experience,
Matthew, just to maybe add to
yes,
it.
yep, absolutely. They call it ego death. When you have like a really profound experience, they call it ego death. And
Right.
and I don't know if it's the death of your ego. I think for me anyway, it was just the realization that being grateful was profoundly more meaningful than anything else. And so it allowed me to be more empathetic, you know, and that's one of those things where, because I was on trazodone for years. I used, and it was, you know, that made me feel more detached. It made me feel lethargic, and it wasn't a medication I particularly liked. So with this psychedelic experience, I was like, I'm not using this anymore. Like there's no, you know, and I haven't since. And so, yeah, it was incredibly profound. And I'm glad that society's starting to kind of come back around. They're seeing the science of it. They're seeing it's not just like hippies and going to concerts. Like there's actual, there's data, there's proof, there's people like me who have completely changed the way they thought and are now on this path of creativity and being productive and motivated, because I can then motivate other people. And that is at the root of everything I do.
Let's push on to that, because you're very good at it. Your videos catching me straight away. Your photos are literally what I think I look like when I'm training, but I'm sure I don't. But the chains and the hammer, they're absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
You've actually got some Viking in you mentioned.
Yeah. So Norwegian, a lot of my family is Eastern European. So I mean Russian, Norwegian, Polish, Hungarian, and then on my biological dad's side, Danish and Irish Scots. So
wow,
we did the DNA profile, and yeah, so a lot of that came back Eastern European, German, stuff like that. So, you know, the thing that's funny with the pictures is it's kind of, I don't tend to take myself too seriously. And I was like, you know, here's the thing. I'm going to take these ridiculous pictures. I'm going to catch people's attention. And I know that they're going to assume I'm somebody else just on the picture. Then they read what I've written and everyone's like, oh, wait a minute. Wait, like, okay, this guy's talking about very personal things. It's not all meathead, like, oh, you're a bitch if you're not doing this. It's like, no. I'm not here to push that message. It's like, I understand, because I've been in those places where I felt weak and I felt, you know, I can't find the light, and I want people to know that they're not alone in that. And so, you know, I catch them with the images, and like, I got like swords and axes and chains, and I just got all this crazy stuff. And I was like, man, I'm just going to start doing this, because if you dig back on my Instagram, if you go back like to last summer, my Instagram was totally different, because like I said, I organically found what worked. And I was like, man, taking these pictures and then writing a very meaningful message, that gets a lot more response. And so I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep developing this. And then started adding in sort of the health piece to it then,
yeah.
You know, the fitness, the workouts, this is what I'm doing. And then it just started becoming a melding of mind and body, you know, like, because you can't have one without the other. I mean, there are people that outwardly are healthy and sure they probably have their problems, but overall, I suspect most people that take care of their bodies also have a pretty healthy mind. So
absolutely. And you know, John McPhee, I think we spoke to him just before we started recording. You know, he's not a psychologist, he's not a doctor, he's a former sergeant major, but he states 70 to 80% of somebody that's in the dark places problem, if they just stop drinking and start eating and start moving, it's going to solve 70-80% of their problem, you know, which is
yes,
why people I
yes.
think are attracted to you and asking you those questions like they are. You remind me of a Viking JP Sears.
Yeah.
He's, you know, very eloquent when you speak.
That's hilarious.
On video,
yeah.
You get your message across so well.
Well, here's the thing. I look the way I look. And when I start talking about things like psychedelics and cannabis and working out, people, they hear those things and they immediately have judgments. Like they already, and then they look at me like, this guy's got long hair, he's tattooed, you know, he's probably just some meathead stoner guy. And so I guess I've always made it a point to make sure that, I can look whatever way, but when I start talking, people are gonna be like, oh, okay. All right. So, okay. So he's making sense. Like there's actually something there. So that's why I'm always, with the way I write and with the way I talk, I'm like, I have to make sure I'm being taken serious, you know, because it's easy to shrug someone off when it's like, they've got a good message, but they just can't deliver it, or they get too emotional about it, and like they inject too much of their maybe a little bit too much negativity into it, and I think that turns a lot of people off. And so I remind people like, hey, I'm not always a positive guy, but I'm constantly assessing my mindset and my behavior. And I put myself in that position because that's where I want to be. So it's not faking it till I make it, but it's being mindful of the fact that, you know, being in that healthy, positive mind space, it just takes you further, you know, it just takes you further. And so when I'm sending these messages and talking about them, I always try to make sure that I'm speaking so they understand, and my writing is not confusing. So
that's actually,
that's
really stood out, Matt, because I've looked at your videos, and then it's almost a transcript, it's almost word for word, which is very rare in the socials, and it's very easy for a crayon guy like me to go, that's right, he said this.
Yeah. Well, and so like on my last podcast, it's funny because a lot of times I'll wake up. So I train. So I do 3 strength and conditioning sessions each week.
Yep.
And so around those strength and conditioning sessions is where I like to think and write about my posts. And it's funny because when I wake up, I usually don't know what I'm going to write. It usually develops as I'm feeling a certain way, or I read something, or as I'm working out, just because, you know, when you're working out, this is another thing I love telling people that are creative that don't work out. People don't get it. When you work out, your brain is firing and you're thinking of things. And like, I've had so many killer ideas when I'm working out. So when I'm working out, I'm just thinking of all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'll run to my phone and I'll write down the note. I'm like, that's what I need to expand on. I'll finish my workout, stretch. And as I'm doing all that, I'm writing what I want to say. Like if there's a theme or something, I'll write that out. And so
that's really clever. I like to say to people, my form of meditation is exercise. and having that absence of noisy thoughts can help those other thoughts come to you. But I mean, I was thinking about preaching to the choir, but I would ask you, because you're educated on this side, what is it about that headspace that allows that creativity to come out? I'm sure you would have learned that in your degree.
I think it's the endorphins. It's like, it's a drug. You know, when you take a drug that makes you feel good, your thoughts will soon follow. And so with health and fitness, you know, as our blood starts pumping, our hormones are released into our body, you know, we feel good. And when we feel good, it's almost inevitably going to connect that mind and body to where, you know, it's like, you always hear this when, especially someone who's always healthy, they eat a big meal, right? Like a big meal, it's real like pizza or fatty, and they feel lethargic and they're like, oh, I can't think, you know? And it's like, that's why I tell people that's the difference between being sedentary and being active. It's like when you're active, your mind's always going because, you know, your hormones are pushing, and it's like, you know, when people are eating like crap all the time, they're going to be sluggish. Their mind isn't going to fire as quickly. And so for me, it's like when I'm working out, when I'm rucking, cardio, lifting, it's just everything's firing. I'm thinking, and then at the end of it, I feel great. And then I apply all that, and it just, yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. That I think it's just that endorphin rush. I think that's really what it is. It's all those hormones, all the positive hormones that are associated with, you know, physical activity. So
absolutely, and nothing bad can come of that. You really put an analogy there. I've never heard it described in that way, of how to show someone what it's like to, the difference between a couch potato and being optimal, or couch potato and being unhealthy. And being healthy. That was really clever analogy, talking about that overfed person, because I know what that's like. I walk around, my normal is very different than anybody else's, but I can absolutely relate to what you said there. Exercise, you do some really interesting strength and conditioning exercises, you know, fancy words for you get strong. What's the basis of what you do exercise wise? I mean, they're pretty barbaric stuff.
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny, I've mentioned this in a couple of my, I think it was the podcast I did on the evolution of my training. So most of my lifting life, I did a traditional power building, you know, did a bench, rest for 3 minutes, then do it, you know, cardio is lacking. But throughout the military, especially the Marine Corps, there were flashes of kind of what I'm doing now. Like in Afghanistan, a lot of times we kind of had to make do with what we had. So like found a wheelbarrow, turned it into a drag sled. We had sandbags, we had all this odd stuff that we could use. But the problem was, I'd always looked at that style of training as like a novelty. Like I never saw it as a way I would actually train. I was like, no, I'm just doing this because I can't get to the gym. You know, that's the only, so it was a mindset thing. You know, fast forward a bunch of years, I'm bored with it. And I found Jailhouse Strong, the Instagram page. I have Tom Haviland, who is in your neck of the woods, actually. He's a monster. And I read his book, Josh Bryant. I read his book, Tactical Strongman. And in it, he had a couple of different programs, and one of them caught my eye. And he called it Tactical PHA, or Peripheral Heart Action Training. And the interesting thing about this PHA style of training is it came about in like the late 50s, early 60s, popularized by a bodybuilder named Bob Guida, who won the 66 Mr. America. He beat Sergio Oliva, who was a 3-time Mr. Olympia.
Wow.
And he trained in this PHA system. And it's basically, and so what Josh Bryant did is he he gave it a tactical bent. So he basically implemented some strongman lifts, and it's because it's a supercharged circuit training routine. It's what it is. It's a brutal circuit style workout. And I'm 40, right? And I think people forget that. They see how I'm training, but it's like, it's a testament to the style of training that I'm mobile. I'm an infantry Marine. I mean, I was ankles, back, you know how it is, like rucking with all that weight. It's just, it brutalizes your body. But like training in this way, I told this to somebody the other day, training in this style, while it looks barbaric and it looks brutal, I actually feel less beat up than when I did when I was like doing a traditional power building routine where, sets, 4 to 6 reps, I would rest for 3 minutes. And it's really interesting because I'm still lifting fairly heavy, but I'm lifting in higher reps. I'm using movements that are easier to carry over into real life, especially for the first responder, the military. And like, these are things that I think everyone should be doing if they're in that kind of job. Like, this is the kind of training they should be doing, because this is what gets you ready for a fight or flight situation, right? Like, training your body not only increasing your conditioning, but also increasing your strength base at the same time. People always separate those. They don't think they can go together, but I think they can. And that PHA system, I mean, it's scientifically backed. I mean, there's plenty of studies that have showed the effectiveness of this style of training, and you put it into a tactical environment, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You can scale it to however you want. You can adjust, like in one workout. Let's say this last workout I did. So my Zercher workout. So what I did is I break it down. I usually have 2 circuits, and each circuit has about 4 to 5 movements, and I'll work through each movement one after the other, and then I'll rest. So within that circuit, I'll do the first round, I'll do strength. So I'm working with like 8 reps. Second round, I will up the weight and I'll shoot for 4 reps, working on more strength. And then my last round, I'll lighten the weight up and work on explosiveness. So it gives me the ability to work on all these different, parts of what it is to be, strong, conditioned, and explosive. So
absolutely, all those functions of fitness. I absolutely agree when you said first responders, tactical athletes. It brought me straight back to 2 things. So a lot of people don't realize I was a police officer before I was a fireman. So I spent a couple of years there. And one job we had 7:30 Friday night, just started a shift, talking to these 2 people, and boom, I was into a 90-meter sprint. Literally, the guy covered 90 meters in 9 seconds. We checked it out. It's crazy. He'd had a ton of speed just before he found us. And then it turned into about a 400-meter run. But that's from 0 to the fastest I could run, but with weight. We got like 8-10 kilos of gear. And then there's moved on to jumping out of the fire truck. You jump in the fire truck, you then got to pull that hose rail off. So people do these sled drags with ropes or whatever, or battle ropes and these things. I'm literally yanking this thing for 60 meters of it to get the hose out for the guys. You have to be strong enough and fit enough together. Bicep curls and a run ain't going to cut it, or bicep curls on a bike. It's got to be all together. And funnily enough, Matt, I've evolved to that style of training just naturally as well. And I really love that you said the guy who beat Sergio Oliver those many times did this style of training and still got those hypertrophy, those bodybuilding style results.
Well, I think I think people get circuit training confused with like, you know, lately I've been kind of hitting on the bodybuilding thing. And like, I think people are like, oh, this guy's hating on bodybuilding. And it's not that. Like, there are definitely elements of traditional bodybuilding that can benefit somebody. But look, the reality is the sport of bodybuilding isn't about function. It's all about form. Like, there's nothing functional about a majority of bodybuilders. And so like, I think people see circuit training, they think of commercial gym, they're doing these machines, right? It's just, you know, they're not really doing much. Where you look at this style of training, and it's far more in the realm of like strongman medleys. You know what I mean? It's like doing a bunch of strongman medleys all the time. Like, that's just the way this is. And like, going from you talking about, you know, my dad and brother, my dad's a retired police officer. My brother's a police officer in Dearborn, Michigan. And I wish he would be in better shape, but he's had those situations too, where one minute you're talking to this person, next minute either they're taking off or they're trying to get your gun. You know, they're trying to wrestle your gun away from you. You gotta be, I tell people that I think the most important thing with this program, what it builds, is confidence, right? Because when you have confidence in your physical capabilities, you've already won a majority of the skirmishes you'll ever get into. Because you already know, like, I already know how I'll operate. I already know how I'll operate under stress. I already know how my body, like, people who aren't in good shape, if they suddenly find themselves in a situation where they have to run, they could have a heart attack because their heart is not ready for that sustained increased heart rate. So next thing they know, they're on the ground having a heart attack because they're just not, their body's not prepared for it. So I think this is important, this style of circuit training. And I liked doing what I'm doing, especially on social media, because people are seeing that. They're like, wow, this guy's 40 years old.
Yep.
And if he can do it, well, then I can do it. You know, it's not, I'm not special. There's nothing special about me. I'm a short guy. I'm just driven and I'm disciplined. And when you put those together, you're going to get those results, and you're going to feel, you know, you're going to feel amazing. So,
and on top of that, the crucial part we missed is, for me, and I can see it for you, but it's assumption, so it's a question. It's fun. That's kind of training for you. It seems like fun.
Yeah. Yes. It's, well, and again, it's that antidepressant. It's like, I can go into a workout and I'm like, man, I don't want to do this. I feel like crap. But then every single time I finish my workout, I'm like, I feel great. I'm in a better mood. I'm talkative, and it's just, you know, it's that feeling, and all of a sudden the actions, the motions, the movement. I mean, it's fun. It feels good. And I tell people, it's like, it's a good kind of addiction. You know, it's the thing that you want to be drawn and addicted to, not because you're trying to prove something, but because ultimately you're getting healthy and it's fun.
Yeah.
You feel good, you get this release, and it's just, you get this sweat, and, you know, you always feel amazing after.
Now, speaking of fun, one of those pieces of equipment that we both use, the Banff hammer, you got some cool things going with that. You use it a lot differently and a lot better than I do, maybe more experience. Let's just talk about how you use that, how you found it, and what you do with the Banff hammer.
You know, I saw it on Instagram. Do you remember Bud Jeffries on Instagram? He was a performative strongman. He passed away recently.
Oh, wow.
Well, he was using one, and I saw that he was using, I'm like, where the hell did he get this big, huge hammer? And he had tagged Banff hammer in one of his posts. So I went to the site, And this was months ago. And I was like, okay, wow, cool, And then it started showing up in my feed. And as my training was evolving, because you got to think, I've only been training in this style for the last like 7 months.
Wow. Yeah.
So as I started evolving, I've seen people doing this mace work and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I want to get a hammer. Like, let me get one of these hammers and start to implement it into my program. So I actually reached out to Sean, and we talked on the phone for probably 20, 30 minutes, because I had sent him a message. I was like, hey, this is where I'm at in my journey, like my strength levels. What would you recommend size hammer that I get? Because I'm like,
Great question.
I see you got a giant 40-pound hammer. And he's like, dude, the way you've been training is like, I'd go with the 40-pound. And wow, that was a game changer. that thing is, so the thing I like about it the most is because my stuff because I've altered even Josh Bryant's tactical, I've altered it even more to suit what I want. And so a lot of what my workout is very combatives oriented. I don't separate out bag work. Like, so in one of my circuits, I'll do, like some one-arm dumbbell presses and then go hit the heavy bag. So like I'm exhausting myself and still applying power. And so with the hammer, I realized that it is a excellent forearm and hand builder, because especially a big 40-pound hammer, you're swinging that around, that's got great carryover to being a boxer, a striker, because the thing is, it's like people don't understand if they've never thrown a punch. If they don't do it right, they're gonna break their fingers, they're gonna break their wrist, if they don't have the strength for it. So I realized that this hammer and doing swings and slams and smashes with it, I'm like, you got to hold it and force it to your will the entire time. And I tell you what, my grip strength is off the charts. I mean, it is, and I deal with arthritis. I've got arthritis in my hands, and
wow.
As long as I'm keeping that strength element going, it's like, it feels amazing. It's really helped with a lot of that.
I agree. And that's what, when I interviewed Sean, we're talking about why it's great for the tactical athlete. And I'm not sure if you know, but he started off as an American Ninja.
Yeah.
So grip and unconventional training was so important for him. But no, I love it. What it does is it shows your quality. I mean, I'm a right-handed guy. I can hammer, punch, all those things with that right hand, but you try and do it with the left hand with that hammer and you feel like a little baby.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny because one of the things I realized I needed to do in my own training was, I had a lot of strength imbalances because, for so many years, I just barbell. That was it. And any dumbbell training I did, I never isolated or did single arm work, where now pistol squats, Bulgarian split squats, one arm dumbbell presses, one arm chest presses. So I've been really hitting, because I had the same thing. It's like my right side is strong, and it's like my left side, I've always had to keep. And now I've been training those separately, where when I come together and do, regular bench or with a regular barbell, I mean, I feel so much stronger, because now I know I'm working both of these sides. I'm getting some more symmetry, and a lot of my knee pain and elbow pain disappeared when I started focusing on single arm and like single leg movements, especially like with the hammer too, add that into it. And it was a huge game changer for me.
Look, I love it. I'm still learning a lot. I'm an old guy, but I'm here to learn from anybody that can teach me. So I've got one of your videos still saved on a tab. The hundreds of tabs I got open.
Cool.
The lunge one. So I'll learn that. I'd like to tie this up, because it's really where you're at is homesteading. That
Yeah.
seems like a dream to many people, Matt, and a pipe dream or whatever, or a fantasy. But look, you're there and you've done it, and a lot of us would like to get away. Can you just talk to us about homesteading, how you got into it, what it sort of involves day to day, and yeah, just tell us about your experience with it.
I had always wanted to do it, and so as my time in the military came to a draw, myself and my ex-wife, my wife at the time, so we were saving money, and there was something we had decided that we wanted to do even before I got out. So I got out and ended up in Missouri because I have family here. Well, Missouri is a very homestead friendly state, because I knew when I got out of the military, I had, my mental process was still very dark and very kind of hostile. And I wanted to reconnect. And it sounds cheesy, but it's like I wanted to reconnect with nature, and I wanted to, it goes back to having a purpose. I wanted, growing my own vegetables, butchering all my own meat, raising my own chickens. So we got a little homestead, started getting involved with like the local homesteading scene, started growing all my own vegetables, got chickens, we did some pigs. Now, the crazy thing about that was it's an awesome experience because you're outside, and I'm always barefoot, right? So I it's like I'm outside in the dirt, I'm cultivating these plants, they're alive. I do organic gardening and companion planting. So
Great.
you're basically planting vegetables and flowers that all benefit each other, and they bring in all these beneficial pollinators. And so you're seeing this whole biome thrive because you decided to grow a healthy garden, and then your chickens get to eat on the vegetables. And in that experience, I learned really what they mean by the circle of life. You see things giving birth. Like I had a dog, and I reared 2 litters of puppies, and it was the coolest experience, just getting to see how all that works. And then I've raised chickens. I've hatched my own chickens in a brooder and took care of them. And so it gives you this massive sense of not only purpose, but kind of like connection to not only earth and nature, but how your ancestors probably lived. It gives you a little bit of an insight into the work it took to just survive 200 years ago, where like you're looking at the weather because it's like, man, is it going to be a bad day? Do I need to go out and cover the vegetables? Keeping an eye on the chickens, and then hunting, because I'd go off into the woods and forage for mushrooms, edible, gourmet mushrooms. I'd go hunting, and all the meat that I took, I processed myself. I didn't take it to a processor. I learned all that stuff myself because I figured at the end of the day, being a homesteader meant that I was going to try to do as much on my own as possible. And there's just a more profound feeling of gratitude when you take a deer and you process, you have that emotional response, and then you process it. It's just, I don't know. I guess I was more grateful for that meal because I knew, the animal was alive. I took it and I gave it the respect it deserved. I did all the work myself. Nothing goes to waste. And so the whole homesteading experience it was another piece of that puzzle that I needed, because I'm doing it now. I'm re-implementing, I got my garden going, I got chickens, and it's that connection. It's that connection to life that I think for me makes homesteading so much fun, and being in nature and hearing the birds. And it's like, I know a lot of people don't find it appealing. I know there's a lot that do, but there's plenty of people that don't find it appealing. And I get it. It's definitely a life outside of the margins, but man, I wouldn't have it any other way, you know?
Oh, that's brilliant. I love how you then these people get in their beliefs. They didn't say, right, this is the only way it is, that everybody should do this. Because when we started this show, it's about a sense of purpose, and it's your purpose, and it's the same with everybody else. You got to find your purpose. I talked about Ollie at the start. His purpose is helping others with a military style civilian training program. Everybody's sense of purpose is different, but for the veterans listening, and I'm sure we're going to get a ton because of our genres, you know, that word transition, it means a lot to me. You're transitioning your identity away from the guy with body armor and an M4. You have to transition your identity, and you got to therefore find a different purpose. And it's just really cool to see you show your purpose, Matt. You do it very, very well. I've mentioned that before, and it's very attractive because of your you're just so real. You're so I've almost lost the words there. It's people can see a little bit of that in you, and then they want to then grow it. It's really,
yes,
really, really cool, and for them to reach out is great. So I guess that brings us to, and I'm kind of still intrigued. How the hell do you make money? So, and can we help you out with this show? What do you do for income?
I was medically retired out, so I get what I get from the VA, and then just side stuff, you know, training, programming, and stuff like that. So I don't need a lot of money. Like, that's why I've been successful, is the little bit of money I get, I make work, because I don't want a lot. Like, the things that I want are typically not things that I'm going to buy anyway. I mean, sure, I got a house, and the cost of living where I live is stupid cheap, which is another reason why I like living in Missouri. It's I can afford it. So, you know, I'm at a comfortable point where I have that ability from the money I get to focus on building. Career is not the right word, because when I got out of the military, I told myself I was never going to work for somebody again. I was going to figure out how to build my own path, and I wanted to be my own boss. And that's been this whole journey. And like I had said, all those seeds are being planted, are growing fruit. You know, they're bearing fruit now. And so, you know, I live below my means. You know, I'm a bachelor now, so it's just me and my 3 dogs. And any money I get, I reinvest it back into my training. I reinvest it into the things that, like podcasting, like stuff like that. So, and then now with homesteading, you know, like vegetables and eggs and stuff like that, I don't have to pay for any of that. So there's all these little cool things I do that make my life easier, that I don't have to spend a ton of money on, and which allows me to focus on what I'm doing now, which is, you know, writing, motivating people, you know, showing them that, you know, like, look, life can suck, but it's not going to always suck. It's going to pass. You know, it does get better. And I just want to remind people that, because look, you may have too, I've lost so many friends and veterans to suicide, because I guess they must have felt that it was never going to get better, you know. And, you know, I had a very close experience with suicide before I got out, and that left a Marine brother of mine. I have his casket flag on my bookshelf, you know, and that's my reminder. He's my reminder of why I say what I say and I do what I do, you know, because he he lost the fight, and so it's like, I try to tell people, it's like, man, you got to keep going, right? You got to keep pushing. You got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, because it gets better. I know that has nothing to do with what I do for money, but it all kind of ties in.
Matt, you answered the question, and you couldn't have done it more authentically. And I've got there is your authentic purpose. You really couldn't have answered that question more perfectly, because it just shows through. And that's what I was trying to find words for before, was your authenticity shines through. So that's a perfect place for the listener to, if you've got this far and you don't know Matt before now, get on the Insta, check Matt out, because if I say this with so many of the veterans I'm lucky enough to interview, not only veterans, even some of the athletes, if just one thing we can say in these shows helps one person, I think we've pushed, we paid that forward. We've done our job, and that's amazing.
I agree.
To finish on there, Matt. Phenomenal. I'm so happy for you where you're at as well. Let me say that.
No, I appreciate you reaching out and even having me on. I've seen some of your guests now. I was like I'm like, man, there's a lot of heavy hitters. I mean, I see you were doing some work with T-Mac, and I was like, whoa, and that's the big times there.
Oh man, I was just listening to the live stream with Pat Mack and his partner CJ today, and I'll quickly touch on it. Pat Mack did an episode with Chris Costa. Chris Costa, for those who don't know, is a very clever, very good firearms instructor, but he hasn't been military. And apparently all the firearms people, all the gun people, were just hating on him. And the actual guy that invited him to work with him, a tier 1 Delta Force guy, is humble enough to just collaborate with this guy and learn what he's got to learn and share it to other people. We're all about humility. We're all about learning from others. And it's just been amazing listening. We've got pages of notes here, Matt. Really cool to see your journey, really clever things. We've covered so many different things, from, transition out, psychologically getting your head straight, physiologically with psilocybin. What a way to go. I had no idea about that. We've looked at the which is really clever evolution, and then the homesteading. I must say that it's a very well-rounded podcast you've presented for people to at least take that step forward to reaching out to you and or making that step forward for themselves as well.
Definitely.
I'll just.
I appreciate you having me on too. I mean, this is.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're very welcome, man. I've been hanging to have you on and have a good chat. The Heathen Machine on Instagram, the Heathen Machine Chronicles. I'm going to jump on your podcast. I'm going to get that in the car tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. Excellent. Well, hey, this was awesome. And maybe in the future, I can reciprocate, have you on mine, and we can switch roles.
Thank you. My head would be much easier that way. I'd love to. And look, I'd love to get you back on in the future if you're interested, and maybe talk about more of the homesteading side. That's something that be really interesting to a lot of people, given 2022 and what's going on in the world.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I'll hit pause and we'll speak then. Thanks, Matt.
Cool.